I genuinely look at interviewing like dating. I've been with my wife now for over 15 years, and God forbid that changed. I'd probably go find a single friend who knew what the heck was going on out there and get some advice. I look at interviewing the same way. If in the next 15 minutes or so we can instill some advice on you that'll help you be that much more successful in your interview, I think it's time well spent. One of the pieces of feedback that I get from our hiring managers is that our candidates are significantly better prepared than those candidates coming in on their own. And I believe it's because of this next piece of advice. Do your homework. Do some research this evening. Visit their website. Most companies have fantastic websites right now with great information on it. If you're interviewing with an organization that sells its products through retailers, go visit a store. Go check out how their products are assorted on the shelves. Go speak with somebody who's representing their product and get their feedback of dealing with the organization. Based on your research, come up with a list of 10 questions, 5 regarding the company and 5 regarding the position itself. Now, this interview is going to go relatively quickly. I don't necessarily expect you to get through 10 questions in each interview. Heck, you might not get to any of the questions that you put to paper. But it's the process of doing your research and putting these questions together that will allow you to have an intelligent dialogue throughout the interview. I believe there's an art to asking questions. When you prepare these, I want you to follow 2 rules of thumb. First is, do your best to keep all of your leading questions as open-ended as possible. Limit the questions that can be answered with a yes or no. Secondly, you've probably been in an interview or even just a discussion before where it feels like a back and forth question and answer session, maybe even just an interrogation of sorts. I want to prevent that from happening here. And the way that we do that is that we prove to the interviewer that you understand that which you're asking about. The way that we do that is we make sure to include some insight on the front end of the question. So, for example, if you're talking about company information, rather than asking an organization, what are your growth plans for next year, you might say, hey, when I did my research on your website, I saw that you guys grew by 10% 2 years ago, 12% last year. What is your anticipated growth looking to the next 2 years? Or a simple question regarding the role might be, at company X, when I improved forecast accuracy from 70 to 77%, we saw a reduction in inventory of $1.5 million. What results are you looking for out of this position? From an HR standpoint, you'll be able to ask a lot more of your culture and company-related questions. Across the board, when you think of all the interviewers, don't be afraid to ask the same question of multiple people. Heck, if you do this properly, you may feel like a broken record when you come out of there. But this can be important. If you're asking the same question and getting answers that are 180 degrees apart, that may be a red flag. Be ready for the tough questions. On the surface, they look like the easiest questions out there. For example, the #1 question in my experience that knocks people out of the interviewing process is, tell me about yourself. Seems like such an easy question on the surface, but the problem is it is so open-ended that people can answer it in various ways. I've had some candidates take 30 seconds. Literally, in one case, I had someone take 30 minutes to answer that question. If you're getting this or other questions that are extremely open-ended and you're not positive as to what they're looking for, do your best to clarify it. For example, Joe, there's a lot of facets of my background that I'm really proud of. Is there something specific that you'd like me to focus on? Other generic questions that you should be prepared to answer: what do you know about our company? Why are you interested in working for us? Why are you interested in leaving your current company? What stood out to you on our website? Can you name a couple of our brands, for example? If this is an opportunity that you're going to need to relocate to, why are you open to considering relocation? Those are just a few things you should be ready to answer. When it comes to answering questions, no negatives. No negatives about past jobs, past employers, past bosses, none of it. If you sense that somebody's probing for negative information in their question, do your best to answer it as quickly and concisely as possible, but most importantly is finish it with a positive. If somebody's really probing for negative information and you finish it with a positive, most often you're going to throw them off and they'll move on. For example, Kelly, tell me about your worst boss. Well, the problem with my worst boss was she didn't treat others with respect. And as our role was one that required a lot of cross-functional collaboration, unfortunately, those folks in return didn't treat us with respect. What I've learned from this is something that I practice in my life daily, which is simply treat others the way you want to be treated. It goes without saying, this is a business formal interview. Unless the company invites you to do otherwise, men, nice suit and tie, women, suit and a blouse perhaps. This may sound like a bizarre suggestion, but I strongly recommend that you pack an extra shirt and tie or blouse with you. 10% of the times when I debrief candidates, it starts with, it would have gone great if, and usually there's some reference to spilling or dropping something on themselves that creates a huge distraction during the interview. Truth of the matter is most hiring managers don't care. They assume you didn't necessarily pull a shirt or blouse out of the closet that morning with a huge coffee stain on it, but the reality is it takes away the attention of the candidates. At the same time, if you're anything like me, I like to snack throughout the day. Strongly suggest you simply pack an energy bar, a piece of fruit, candy, whatever your fix is that you can eat in between interviews. Make sure you bring enough copies of your resume for everybody, including yourself. This is the document that most interviewers are going to be referring to during your discussion. I want you to have a copy of this with you so that if you're citing statistics, costs saved, percentage of efficiencies gained, etc., that you're citing it consistent with what's on your resume and what the interviewer has reviewed in advance. Now, with that being said, this is not an invitation to read off your resume, it's simply to have a reference point. Attitude means a lot, and I don't mean ego here. As we say in the office, smile, but don't be phony. Mention their name once in a while. You ever feel like you're in a meeting, the person you're interacting with, they're speaking back, they're asking other questions, but you can tell mentally they're not there. Maybe they're just blatantly multitasking by reading emails on the computer. Maybe you sense that they're daydreaming about a date coming up this weekend. Whatever the case is, I don't ever want the interviewer to get to that place with you. When you're in a position like that, if you've lost the person, when you mention their name and you do it with some conviction, mentally it's like watching them fall off a chair. It's pretty funny. The way that we prevent the interviewer from ever getting to that place to begin with is every once in a while we do mention their name. Joe, great question, and answer the question. Mention their name from time to time, but don't overdo it. When it's done too much, and it can actually become a big distraction. Now, it's not uncommon that you're going to get this question, and it's often most the dreaded question that you are going to get, usually coming from HR or the hiring manager, and that is the compensation question. Jack, what are your compensation expectations for this role? If you ever had interest in politics or being a politician, I want you to practice here. Think back to a debate. Everybody wants to know where the politician stands on a given issue. The question is finally presented during the debate, and what does the politician do? They state the facts that everybody already knows. They bring up all this historical information, and they package it in a way that makes it sound like they're answering the question, and they move on. And it's not until 5 or 10 minutes later you realize, wow, they never answered the question. I want you to do the same thing here. So the facts in this case are what you're making today. Sue, I'm currently making X dollars plus Y bonus potential. I've done my homework. I understand what other companies are paying for this role. And I trust that if we get to this point, you and Company X will put together a fair and equitable plan commensurate with my experience. And then it's time to be quiet. I will tell you in my own experience, if I sense that somebody is very comfortable in the fact that they're not giving up this information, I'll back off. But at the same time, if I sense that they're not comfortable giving this answer, I'll put them in a professional corner until I get that number out of them. So, if there's any one thing that you need to rehearse for this interview, it's your response to the compensation question. Now, it's common during the face-to-face interview that you're going to meet with multiple people coming from multiple functions. Each of them is going to be looking at this role from a slightly different angle. My suggestion is that you figure out as quickly as possible how they are viewing this position. Two of my favorite questions to start off these interviews with are, first, what are the 2 to 3 things that I could do in the first 3 to 6 months that would have the biggest, most positive impact on you and your team? Now, assuming they answer that, a great logical follow-up is, what are the 2 to 3 biggest challenges I'm going to face in making that a reality? If you can get answers to these questions early in the interview, it'll greatly help you understand how you should be answering their questions throughout the dialogue. Let's assume you don't feel like these are appropriate questions. Maybe you already know the answers to them because you spoke with the person on the phone in advance, for example. At an absolute minimum, I suggest you try to figure out what the interviewer wants to talk about. For example, Robin, I see here on the agenda that we've got 45 minutes. So that this is a good use of your time as well as mine, can you help me understand your expectations for the discussion? Now, let's assume you get answers to any of these questions. Write them down. I'm not saying write it down so you can say, hey, you said this, you said you're looking for this, I've done that. But more importantly now, you've got a refresher there so that as you're answering their questions throughout the discussion, you can answer them in the context of what they already told you they want to hear. At the same time, if there's something that they said was important to cover that hasn't been addressed, you can bring them full circle in the end. For example, hey Robin, you said that you wanted to discuss this. We haven't covered it yet. I realize we're coming to the end of our appointment here. Do you want to spend a few minutes on it? Next, let's assume that you're coming to the end of the interview. You like what you've heard and you're interested in the next step. Even if you're on the fence, I suggest that you show interest in moving forward. To do so, I'd like you to follow a 3-step close. The first step is summarize something that has got you excited about this opportunity before you even go in and meet with the hiring manager. Number 2, summarize something that you and the hiring manager connect on. Think of a time when you're meeting with a friend or family member. Perhaps you're telling them a story about an experience of yours, for example. And halfway through that discussion, they're shaking their heads, they're smiling. You can almost sense that they wish they were there with you. Whatever that moment is during this interview, that's the thing that you summarize. And lastly, you blatantly need to let them know that you would like to move forward. I hear from hiring managers all the time, hey, great candidate, skills, I like this, this, and this. They would be a great fit on the team, but my concern is I didn't see any of that excitement from them. Therefore, I'm going to move with this other candidate. So I'm saying you blatantly need to let them know that you want to move forward. For example, our styles may differ, but if it were me, it might look something like this. Nick, this has been great. When I did my research before coming in here, the emphasis that you guys place on work-life balance and the attention to detail in your products really stands out to me. You've talked about challenges X, Y, and Z, and I've told you how I've done A, B, and C, and am convinced I could do it even better this time. I understand from my recruiter that the next step would be this. I'm interested in moving forward. Based on your own expectations, is there any reason you would feel differently? Lastly, make sure that you get a business card from everybody that you meet with. My rule of thumb is before you go to bed at night, you send each individual an email. thanking them for their time. A couple of rules of thumb regarding emails. First, even if you're sending the exact same email to each interviewer, do not, and I repeat, do not send it as a bulk email. To me, that's the equivalent of sending a thank you note and asking them to pass it around. Secondly, I'm seeing a lot of emails get sent out of personal accounts like Hotmail, Yahoo, and Google accounts, where spell check is not an automatic feature. Make sure you're doing your spell check and grammar check outside the email if needed. You're investing way too much time in this process to skip a simple 30-second step that could come back and bite you in the end. Thanks for investing the time to watch this. We look forward to syncing up with you to talk about the nuances of this position and make sure that you're as best prepared as possible going into your interview.